your choice is all up to you. Too many things, don't know what to do. Speak your mind and you won't get judged. If it kicks off, you won't hold no grudges. What? Come online, come online. CSI, CSI. Come online, come online. CSI, CSI. Yeah, your choice is all up to you. Too many things, don't know.
Children's rights are the civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights that all children everywhere are entitled to, as set out in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of a Child. These rights include the rights to an education, to play, to access healthcare, to have a voice, to be protected from violence and abuse, and to have an adequate standard of living. All children have the same rights, no matter where they live or who they are, no matter their race, no matter their sex or any other status. A child is a child. Plan International Ireland is a development and humanitarian organisation that advances children's rights and equality for girls across 77 countries. From providing inclusive and quality education to delivering education in conflict and crises, and working with communities to end harmful practices that infringe upon the rights of girls. Their work is changing children's lives for the better and supporting them to realise their rights and potential. Media and Communications Officer for Plan International Ireland, Amanda KEANE, has experience in the national and international not-for-profit sector and UN, and has primarily worked to raise awareness and effect positive change in the area of gender equality. At Plan International Ireland, they strive for a just world that advances children's rights and equality for girls. At the core of their work is ensuring girls can learn, lead, decide, and thrive in all aspects of their lives. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us today, Amanda, and I'm very excited to share all the work that you guys do here and around the world. It's incredible. So let's start out by finding a little bit more out about Plan International and when it was founded and why.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. So Plan International was actually founded during the Spanish Civil War. So its origins are in the 1930s. It was set up in 1937. It was a British war journalist, John Langdon Davies. He was in Spain and he came across a young boy about 6 years of age who had a note pinned to his clothes from his father, and his father had known that he was going to be killed or shot. And he basically asked for protection for his son in that.
Wow.
So John Langdon Davies set up a kind of a foster program for children who were affected by the Spanish Civil War, and that's really where it began. So children were always at the centre of Plan International's work. And then during the 1950s, Plan International started to expand more into regions of the world that were very much being left behind, so across Africa, Asia and Latin America as well.
Plan International has many donor countries around the world too. Can you name a few, and when did Ireland join?
Absolutely. So Plan International is active in over 75 countries, and the way it's split up is that we have national offices, country offices, regional hubs and advocacy offices as well. So the national offices are really quite spread out across Europe, North America and Australia, and then the country offices are across Africa, Asia and Latin America as well. So the advocacy offices then are based in Geneva, Brussels, New York and Ethiopia. So it's quite a broad spread, certainly, and Plan International Ireland, we concentrate the majority of our work in West African countries, but we do have programs in Asia as well.
And when did Ireland join the party?
So Ireland joined the Plan International Federation in 2003. So we've been active in Ireland since then. I mean, I think Plan International is probably not as well known as other international NGOs that are operating in Ireland. We're relatively young in comparison to some of them, certainly, and we operate on a smaller scale. But the majority of our, I suppose, our financial support and our donor work, we're funded primarily by Irish Aid, so the aid programme of the Irish government. So it's something I think that Irish people and Irish taxpayers can certainly be very proud of, is that is that we are funding really important programs overseas, and we're also funded by the EU, and then we get individual and corporate donors as well.
So we mentioned children's rights, of course, and yours is very girl-focused, but can you tell us some of the issues that you guys are assisting with?
So really at the core of our work, as you said, is ensuring that girls can learn, lead, decide and thrive in all aspects of their lives. And the way that we see that is one of the key ways that girls can access their rights and fulfill their potential is if they can access education.
Yes.
So throughout their lives. So really a core programmatic focus for us is ensuring that girls have access to quality, inclusive and participatory education as well. And that really, really helps with their futures, obviously.
Yeah.
And I mean, within that as well and around that, we look at girls' sexual and reproductive health and rights, making sure that they have access to the education and the resources that they need to make their own choices about their bodies and their, you know, whether they become mothers or not. We also ensure that girls have access, or young women have access to vocational training programs. So for example, if adolescent girls are forced to drop out of school for whatever reason, that they have access to training programs that will help them to access employment and support them and their families. Beyond that, we also have emergency response programs. So an emergency strike, that we are there on the ground in communities, supporting them to you know, rebuild and build resilience during emergencies. And one of the key things that's come up in Plan International's work over the past few years is crises, how they're becoming, you know, conflict, insecurity, all of these things are becoming increasingly complex, protracted, ongoing, cross-border, and they're really, really impacting on girls' ability to access education and access their rights. When crises strike, unfortunately, one of the first things to be compromised is girls' rights and girls' access to education.
It's almost like they kind of forget about those issues for a moment, you know, or if they haven't even thought about them at all, they're sort of in the shadow of the bigger picture, but it's still as important, you know, all along. Yeah. And I mean, how have things changed? Because obviously you will come up against cultural and religious and kind of traditional challenges, you know, and thinking as far as the position of a girl or a young woman in society. How do you kind of get around that? Because it is a very sensitive topic for some.
Yeah, I think no matter where you go in the world, there are gendered norms and stereotypes that will hold girls and women back, and in some parts of the world, unfortunately, they have more of an impact on girls and women than they would here, for example. So some of the barriers that we see to girls being able to access education, for example, is that if they have brothers, that their brothers will be prioritised for education. Once they reach a certain age, they may be destined for child marriage or early marriage, forced marriage, which obviously then for the majority will mean that they don't go back to school, they don't continue with their education.
What age are we talking, just out of interest there?
It can be really any age from when puberty, their periods start. So
are they considered ready?
They're considered ready for marriage, they're considered ready for
children.
Ready
at
for
the
children.
age of 11, 12. That's quite shocking.
It is.
I know that you guys also have done a lot of work with female genital mutilation, which is still happening in various countries. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So female genital mutilation or cutting is something that girls around the world are quite vulnerable, particularly in certain regions of the world. They're quite vulnerable to it. It may be, you know, particularly driven by a girl's socioeconomic status, whether she lives in a rural or an urban area, and then her cultural background as well. And female genital mutilation is considered a violation of children's rights, of girls' rights, and it can happen from any time from, you know, infancy up to during a girl's or a young woman's first pregnancy. And really the impacts are huge. So at the time, at the point of FGM happening, girls are at risk of infection, of intense bleeding, of death, and then ongoing throughout their lives. It's not something that's just left there in that moment, it can impact them all the way through their lives.
Sure.
So their menstruation.
What is the reason for it, actually? I know that there are religious reasons in some cultures and traditional reasons in some maybe tribes, like you say, in rural areas. But what is the actual reason? What is the thinking?
It is considered a rite of passage
Okay.
in certain areas of the world, in certain cultures and from certain backgrounds. But I suppose fundamentally at its core is gender inequality.
Yes.
And how girls are positioned in society,
Yeah.
and I guess control over girls' bodies. But it's a very complex issue because in order to stop it from happening, it's not a case of that it's people just learn about it and then it just stops happening. Like, communities have to be really engaged throughout the process and understand the impacts that it has on girls at the time and then throughout the rest of their lives. And there are amazing activists even here in Ireland that are raising awareness of FGM and bringing community leaders on board. That's a key part of it as well.
Yes.
But what happens oftentimes then with FGM is that unfortunately it's the girls or the women who have undergone FGM themselves as girls in childhood, that they are then perpetuating the practice.
Right.
But for some, it's a means of livelihood. So when engaging communities, it's really important then that alternative livelihoods are offered to the women who are practicing FGM, so that they, find alternatives and they can move away from the practice as well.
And I mean, Ireland is a melting pot of many different cultures. So has FGM kind of made its way here as well?
There have been cases of FGM reported in Ireland. There was one very high-profile case a couple of years ago, and a conviction and outcome in the judicial system for that case. But it is certainly something that, but it has happened, and there is a risk of it happening here too.
Yes, sure. It seems to me a lot of the problems and the work that you do, obviously it is kind of female focused, but it all kind of seems to be centered around objectifying of reproduction in a way, because there's also a stigma attached to menstruation for girls in various countries, and they are missing school, they are thought to be dirty, they're put outside the house even in some cases. Once a month they're dirty and they're not welcome. Maybe they can't even eat at the same dinner table as the family. And of course period poverty is huge all over the world. What have you guys experienced with that, with your work in period poverty?
Period poverty, as we would say, it's an issue that is impacting girls and women from Tipperary to Timbuktu, Kerry to Kampala. Like, it's an issue that is widespread around the world. And really we look at period poverty through a certain lens. We would see 3 core issues around period poverty that we would call the toxic trio of period injustices. And that would be the lack of affordability and the lack of access to period products themselves to be able to manage periods in safety and dignity, the lack of education around periods and a simple understanding of what it is to menstruate and how your body is working during that time of the month and the rest of the month. And then also the shame and the stigma that is attached to having a period and being on your period and everything that comes with, and how women and girls and all people who menstruate are silenced when they're on their period. It's very difficult to talk about it, and
I mean, even in our society, it's quite recent that people feel comfortable enough to talk about it and advertise it and, really speak out, and it's just part of life,
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It's such a natural process.
Exactly.
And yet women are shamed and stigmatized for it.
So how does that impact, obviously, with them, with education? I mean, apart from the fact that possibly they're looking at when the child starts menstruating, we mentioned that they would be married off, and that's time now for them to stop school, or if they even ever went to school, and get on with life. How does it impact them if they happen to even be in school? If they don't have access to products? I mean, it's awful to imagine that a girl would have to just hide away because she didn't have the means to have the dignity and continue her life, her everyday life normally.
Yeah, I've been recently in touch with colleagues in Burkina Faso in West Africa, particularly around the topic of period poverty and how it impacts on girls' access to education. And they were sharing some stories. One in particular that stood out was of a school where there was a young girl, she was 12, 13, and previously when she got her period, she would have to go out to the bushes to change products, and she was using homemade kind of products or rags.
What do they use? Like leaves, I've read.
In some parts of the world, it could be leaves, it could be rags, it could be paper, toilet paper, newspaper. You know, cowhide in some parts of the world. You know, so it's really a case of access to resources and knowledge, but you know, using these alternative, unsafe products has such a risk to your reproductive health system and your overall health and well-being. So in this case, in the school, she used to have to go out to the bushes and change her period products because they didn't have gender segregated toilets or latrines. So oftentimes, because there's such a shame and a stigma attached to periods, and because girls just don't want the boys knowing that they're on their period in general, they, you know, the sanitation and the hygiene facilities need to be appropriate for girls to be able to manage their periods. So Plan International supported with gender segregated latrines, but also then with supporting the girls to make reusable period products that could be used every month so that they could manage their periods. Because sometimes what will happen is that girls will miss the whole whatever length of their cycle is because they need to stay at home to manage their periods, and then, you know, it's access to education for them is so precarious already. So then if they're missing out on school, they're missing out on exams and assessments, then they just fall behind.
Exactly. They're missing a couple of months of school a year.
Exactly.
Actually, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting. I never even thought about the whole kind of sanitation side of things as well. And I mean, I'm sure it's quite an expensive process to, some of the schools possibly don't have anything, you know, in the really poorer areas.
Absolutely. Yeah, wash facilities are, you know, key.
Yeah. And then, I mean, with these reusable products that are also quite new to the market, I feel it's only in the last maybe, what is it, like 5 to 10 years or so that they've got these. It's incredible that they can send these products that they can just keep, you know, they can keep reusing them.
Yeah, and they're making them in school themselves, so that they have them throughout their cycles. Yes, but you know, there are certain products that are more suitable than others. For example, if you have these cups, that are becoming
the moon cup, they call them a moon cup.
Yeah, but you have to have access to hygiene facilities.
Exactly.
To make sure that those are safe to use.
And privacy.
Absolutely.
Which is important
too. Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, I think the challenges for children in those areas in the world is huge, but I do feel like the challenges for young girls and women are of paramount importance. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the other work and kind of stories that have stood out to you in your work that you've done?
I think what strikes me really with so many of the stories that we come across and people's situations is the sense of resilience in very, very difficult and challenging circumstances. I mean, like pre-COVID-19, there was some progress being made on reducing poverty, reducing inequalities, reducing hunger. But now, you know, things are really, they're reversing. Decades of progress is being reversed. So, like, there are stories of people who, particularly in conflict-affected areas, who are up in sticks and leaving their villages with nothing, or their towns with nothing, who then have to settle in other parts of either their country or another country, and the impacts that has on their lives, and for the children who are uprooted from everything that they know, and have to start again. And you know, in emergency contexts, ensuring that children can keep accessing education is so important. But it's difficult. I mean, there are, in certain parts of conflict-affected areas, there are attacks on schools, there are attacks on teachers and students and all education personnel. So education is coming under attack, and this is, you know, it's a core fundamental right of children to be able to access education. But, you know, there are stories of of girls who, because of emergencies, have been thrust out of education, or because of different forms of gender-based violence, who are out of education but then re-enter programs that are about accelerated learning, so that they can catch up with the rest of their peers and re-enter the education system.
I mean, it must have been very challenging for you guys. Obviously, I mentioned about the other conflicts that are going on, and then the work that you are trying to do is in the shadows. But how hard has it been with COVID? Because I know that you guys pulled together and did some work to help with that as well, you know, and then you're kind of steered off the path of your purpose.
Yeah, I mean, Plan International is, you know, part of our work is responding to emergencies, and there has been no, I guess, emergency that has been as widespread as COVID-19 in living memory. So certainly a lot of resources were redirected to managing the COVID crisis in community survival.
Basically,
I mean, people's livelihoods were just ripped from them overnight. Schools were closed down, all infrastructure shut down, health infrastructure came under massive pressure. So some of our work in the past year, 18 months, has been around being able to raise awareness of COVID-19 in communities that might be quite isolated.
They probably don't understand
how
big it is.
They haven't got the information, it's not coming through. So whether that's through radio programs or through community leaders or through education and training in health centres, making sure that people are equipped with the knowledge about COVID-19 and its effects and its transmissibility. And that people then also have access to the hygiene facilities and kits and sanitation things that we all have access to.
We take for granted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how important is education? Because obviously, you know, we're over here and everyone, there are obviously problems here as well, but how important is education for the youth now, the youth here even, to know about these problems and have an awareness and possibly even get involved?
I think it's so important. I think that, you know, in recent years we have more access to information than we've ever had. And we have so much information that, you know, not everything sticks and things get lost and messages get lost. But we certainly think that, I mean, it's been proven over the years that the Irish public have always been aware and cognizant of extreme inequalities and global poverty. And I think that that's, you know, it's part of our own past and our history. You know, we've been a country that has been impacted by poverty, by inequality, by conflict, by migration. So, you know, we're cognizant of it. But, you know, sometimes I think most people have, or a lot of people have their issues that they focus on. So whether it's gender equality or climate change or
homelessness
whatever it is. But in terms of how all of these issues intersect, you know, I think that people are aware of what's going on, but sometimes the scale of it can almost feel overwhelming.
Yes, but I mean, it's a drop in the ocean, but it all adds up, you know.
Absolutely.
So if they think, oh, well, if I could donate this or I could give of my time, it is going to help and it is going to make a difference.
Absolutely.
And I think people need to understand that, you know.
Absolutely. I always remember there was, we saw this picture in our CSB books when I was in school, and it was a picture of the world, and it was just little speech bubbles all over the world saying, what can one person do? What can one person do? What can one person do? When you see that collective impact.
Exactly. That you
so
just gave me chills. I mean, I think it's amazing. But now, you know, with the youth here as well, can they get involved if they want to? Obviously, they can get involved as well with the issues here. There's period poverty here as well, you know. But how can they get involved with Plan International and have a voice?
I think Irish youth in the last few years have become so politicised and mobilised on issues that are affecting their lives, and I think we saw that especially with marriage equality and repeal, how, you know, that younger generation were really, really engaged on topics. And with Plan International, one of the things that I love is that we work in countries overseas, but we're also working here with youth. So at the core really of our youth work is making sure that we work with and not just for young people. So we have a panel of advisors and ambassadors to Plan International Ireland.
Youth ambassadors.
Exactly, they're our youth advisory panel, and they're a group of young people aged between 16 to 24 who give us advice on or tell us about what issues are affecting their lives and what changes they want to see. So in recent years we have been, as you say, campaigning on period poverty here in Ireland, also on the issue of online gender-based violence.
Yeah, that's become a thing. I mean, gender-based violence, you always kind of think of the action of it, but like you say, it's online as well, and it's very damaging. Hugely
damaging, especially within the last year or two. Rates of online abuse and gender-based violence have skyrocketed because the reality is, as more women and girls and vulnerable people spend time online, so too do the people who are willing to abuse them and exploit them. So here in Ireland we did a survey last year of young people, and we found that 67% of the girls and young women we had surveyed had experienced online abuse or harassment. And it's having a huge impact on their self-esteem, on their mental health, on their relationships, on their school, all of these things.
Amazing. So now we mentioned about the ambassadorship program, but for anyone who's interested in helping or getting involved or giving, like we said, it's not a drop in the ocean. If you want to give 20 cents, if you want to give 10 minutes of your time, where can people go? How can they contact you guys, and how can they get involved or even raise awareness and have a voice for Plan International?
I would start with the likes of social media, where people can support to amplify the messages
That's a
that
good word.
we are, amplify them, multiply them, get the word out there. If there's something that you feel strongly about, like one of the issues that we're working on, whether it be period poverty or online abuse, that you can really raise those messages on your own platforms, but also engage with your local politicians and your local community groups and grassroots organisations about these issues as well. So whether it's raising awareness, obviously, of course, we are always open to people who are willing to support us in any way. And if people want to find out more, they can visit www.plan.ie or any of our social media channels.
Amazing. Amanda, it's so good to have you here today, and my mind is going at a million miles an hour because the work you guys do is absolutely incredible, and I feel like the issues are so vast, but I think that it's possible, and I think that you guys have got an incredible handle on things.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So as Amanda said, if you guys want to get involved, all you need to do is go on to plan.ie. It doesn't matter how big or small it is, and like she said, you can amplify Plan's voice on social media as well. You can find them all over Plan International Ireland or plan.ie. Now, if you have a story of inspiration, perhaps you want to get something off your chest, perhaps you have a success story you want to share with us, this is the place to do it. Get in touch on our website, Common Society Issues. For CSI, I'm Helen Dubois.
Hi, I'm Helen.
Hey, I'm Candy.
Hi, I'm Michael.
Hi, I'm Ivy.
And this is Lucia. Thank you for watching CSI.
Make sure to subscribe to CSI Common Society Issues.
And remember to hit that notification bell.
Thank you.